Hi everyone, this is Elena from Merrick's Looms, and welcome to the first video in our How to Warp video series. Today, our video is going to be an overview of the different warping methods that you can do on a Merrick's loom. Week 2 is going to be about continuous warping. Week 3 is going to be about putting heddles on a Merrick's loom for tapestry. And week 4 is going to be about putting heddles on a Merrick's loom for bead weaving. So the last 3 videos are going to be pretty in-depth on those topics. And this video is going to be more about what your options are when you are warping a Merrick's loom and which method might be best for you depending on what project you are making. So let's get started. The first method that we're going to talk about is continuous warping. Now, what continuous warping is it's a method where you basically wrap your warp all the way around your loom, and it's actually attached to a warping bar. And you can, as you weave on the front of your loom, you can actually move the warping bar up the back of your loom, and this rotates your piece around the loom. So it allows you to weave a piece that is longer than the height of your loom. So this is why you'll see, if you look at the statistics for the size pieces each different Merrick's loom can make, every Merrick's loom that has continuous warping as an option can make a piece that is actually, about 1.5 times longer than the maximum height of the loom. So that's a really great advantage. Also, using the warping bar to tie onto allows you to switch up your warp. So if you have warp on a cone or a bobbin and you run out, you can actually tie to the warping bar and tie on a new piece and continue warping. So you don't need to make sure that you have one piece of warp to last warping your entire piece. So that's a big advantage. Another advantage, which is similar to the first one, is that you can change the fell line, which is the place where you are weaving, as you weave. So if you were weaving on a loom that didn't have continuous warping, you'd start weaving here and then it would get higher and higher and higher and higher. And it might not be comfortable to weave at that highest level, right? So you might be like, oh, I'm weaving up here high. You'd have to change where your loom was located or something like that. Move it to a lower table on our looms until, you've woven the entire length of the warp. What you can do is you can move your piece down, you can move your fell line down so it's at a more comfortable place for warping. I think that's something that is an underappreciated advantage of continuous warping. I am constantly moving my fell line down to a really comfortable level, and and you should too. So that is what continuous warping is. With continuous warping, you can use the shedding device. You also don't have to use the shedding device, and this method can be used both for bead weaving and for tapestry weaving. And next week, we are going to go into detail about how to warp a loom for continuous warping. This is the method that people are a little bit nervous about sometimes, because it seems like it's complicated. And even if you watch somebody do it the first time, you're like, what were they doing? Basically, all it is wrapping the warp around your loom. The only difference from actually just wrapping the warp around your loom is that every time you hit the warping bar, which is suspended while you're warping between the two wooden clips, you loop around the warping bar and come back in the direction you came. So you tie onto the warping bar, you go around your loom, come back up, hit the warping bar again, go back down this way, go around the loom, hit the warping bar, go back this way. So you're just going like this. So it really is very easy once you get the hang of it. but we will talk about that a lot next week. Method 2 is called the easy warping method. And it is, as the name suggests, the easiest way to warp a Murex loom. What you do is you tie on to one of these brass pieces, and then you literally just wrap your warp around the loom and then tie on to the other one on the other side. There's no warping bar. There's no going back and looping around anything. It's really, really simple. You just wrap your warp around the loom. This is a great method if you are not comfortable using the continuous warping method yet, and you just want to weave a quick piece. It has a couple of disadvantages. The first one is because it's not continuous warping, you cannot change the level of your piece. So you can't move your fell line down, and you can't rotate your piece around the loom. So you might waste warp. What you can do is you can actually, this is so nifty, you can move the legs of your loom the other way, and you can weave another piece on the other side of your loom. So that is what I suggest people who use that method do, is weave one piece on one side, flip your legs around, weave another piece on the other side. But you can use the shedding device with that method. And again, it's very fast. It's very easy. If you are feeling a little bit nervous about warping, it's a great way to get into warping, to just do it because it's so, so easy. And I find people who start warping with that method, once they try the continuous warping method with a warping bar, it feels a lot easier. Just because they're used to the loom at that point, they're used to wrapping around the loom. And so it's a great gateway to warping. Our third warping method is warping with a comb on your loom. So either a loom like the saffron loom, you see this comb here, or we have Shasta combs, which are combs similar to this that go on the top and the bottom of any classic series Murex loom. And what the comb is they're just these little tines here, and you tie your warp to a tine, and then you can just zigzag and then tie to another tine. I said the easy warp method was the easiest method of warping. This is probably the easiest method of warping, because it's just zigzagging. It's not continuous warping, but you're also not wasting warp. So using the Shasta combs on a classic series loom is actually a really good way to save warp. And you can also use those combs to weave a 4 selvage piece. So you can weave all the way down to one comb and up to the other comb, and you only have 2 warp ends to finish on there. The only problem with doing that is that you're limited to the height of your loom. Actually, on the saffron loom, it's really easy to make a 4 selvage piece because you can move the beam down as low as you want or up as high as you want. So you can adjust that height a little bit more. But the Shasta combs are what I use when I want to very quickly warp a small piece, because you're not wasting a lot of warp, and it's just super, super easy to do. The Shasta combs at this point are only available at 8 cents per inch, though, so that is another disadvantage of using those. And they are also not available for any of our looms that have a double beam, so keep that in mind. But yeah, super easy way to warp. And again, if you're a beginner who's feeling nervous about warping, grabbing a pair of Shasta combs for your loom is a great way to get used to the warping process. Okay, now we are on to method 4. This, my friends, is an 8-inch Laney loom with a no warp ends kit on it. The no warp ends kit was developed for bead weaving. It can be used for a thin tapestry as well. Um, but with bead weaving in particular, sometimes dealing with the ends when you're finishing the piece, dealing with the warp ends, can be a long or difficult process. So this kit, basically what it does is instead of having warp ends to finish, um, because of these little S hooks there, you actually just have little loops at the end. And so you just have two warp ends to finish. So it's really great for making things like bracelets if you don't want to finish the ends. And who wants to finish the ends? What's also nice is you set up the kit. Um, it uses this cord and some rods and the S hooks. Once you've set it up to be a certain size, you can actually take this part off the loom and then warp again with the setup already in place. So if you're doing something like weaving a bunch of bracelets that are the same size, this is a wonderful kit to make the warping process super, super, super easy. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get used to the process. There's a lot of, you need to make sure your tension is correct when you're using this kit. You need to make sure everything is balanced. But once you get the hang of it, it's very, very easy to do. And it's really, really fun to weave using this kit. So for bead weaving, especially small projects, I absolutely recommend the No Warp Ends kit. Okay, and now we are on to warping method 5. The last method that I'm going to talk about today is warping with the extra warping bar kit. This kit allows you to put 2 warping bars on your loom, so you only have one layer of warp in the front of your loom, and you don't have that layer right here in the back. So you'd have one warping bar here and one warping bar up here. The bars are connected with cords, so you still have the tension, but it allows you to get your hand in there. There are 3 reasons why people use this kit. The first is for bead weaving wide pieces with the shedding device. It's really nice to be able to get your hand in there for that. The second is for people who weave tapestry from the back, sometimes like this method. But the biggest reason we find people buy this kit is if they have a loom that is a little bit larger and they want to weave smaller pieces on it, it's great for saving warp because you don't have that warp in the back of the loom. So if you don't need continuous warping to make a longer piece, then you'll save a lot of warp by not having any of that warp in the back. So when people choose to, they just want one loom and they choose to buy a bigger one because they eventually want to make bigger pieces, or might sometimes make bigger pieces and need a loom that is capable of that. Having an extra warping bar kit is a really wonderful thing. Yeah, and that's that. So those are the main methods of warping a Merrick's loom. I hope I gave you a good idea of how easy they are and when you might want to use each method. And now we are going to focus for the next 3 weeks on continuous warping next week and then putting heddles on. Because putting heddles on is probably the most difficult part of warping a Merrick's loom. Not because putting heddles on is very complicated, but because there are a lot of mistakes that you can make. And when you do make a mistake, then the whole thing won't work. So we're going to do a lot of talking about troubleshooting and how to make sure that you're putting the heddles on correctly the first time. So I look forward to talking to you again next week about continuous warping. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly, Elena at myrixlooms.com. Thanks for watching.